Thank you. Thanks everyone for being here. I think the first thing to say is that this presentation being given on Teams rather in person means that we are able to technical difficulties. Just wave me down if anything happens, and I think with a bit of determination we can all get through it. What I'm here to talk to you about is what I've been looking at for the last 3 months. Is that how does playing the drums intersect with your well-being? How can we harness drumming, which has been used for thousands of years for rituals and healing throughout humanity? How can that be harnessed and implemented into a workshop in the modern day that can help build resilience in people and communities? The roadmap for the presentation is we want to start with where the idea is formulated for me, how I got the inspiration to seek knowledge in this area. I'm going to go through some of what has already been established in the academic literature with a proposal for pilot study that I then carried out, how that feeds into a potential larger study, and how this work ultimately feeds into society as a whole and creates a better world for everyone. The inspiration for this research began in 2020 when my girlfriend Posey contracted COVID-19, and after the initial week or so of symptoms like a headache, a chesty cough, and a loss of taste and smell, she had a brain fog, long COVID brain fog that persisted for 3 months, which really knocked her confidence and made it difficult for her to communicate. She had to take a lot of time off work and return on a stepped basis, phased return. And it was through looking at how the virus plays with connections in your brain and neural pathways that I came up with this idea that we could train her brain to get over the sickness. The idea comes from theories based around neuroplasticity that I had read a lot about when I was studying martial arts. And it basically says that if you teach your brain to do something that you've never done before, it can regrow neurons and create pathways around any blockages. So things like learning a new language, learning to dance, doing martial arts are the typical examples. I wondered if drumming wouldn't also do the same thing. So we set about drum lessons. I trained her up to grade 1. We did a little mock exam, and she said that it helped quite a lot. It was confidence building for her. She said that there was something about being a woman that meant you needed to be allowed to make a loud noise. Being allowed to make a loud noise as a woman was like being given permission to be naughty. So that was really fun for her. It helped with her confidence, and she was struggling with verbal communication. And I don't wonder if this idea of being able to communicate through your instrument wasn't a way around, but it helped her with her communication skills anyway. So with that in mind, I then began to look at the academic literature to see if I could find anything that sort of bolstered this idea of drumming being used to boost your mental capacity. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of studies that look at interventions based on music and singing on well-being. One of the first papers that I found, Dagan et al. 2018, from that thousands and thousands and thousands of studies, was able to pick 61 for a systematic review that verges on meta-analysis, showing that well-being outcomes are affected when you use music and singing in adults. But the reason that they were only able to pick 61 studies out of thousands and thousands and thousands was that the methodologies of all of the studies seemed to vary wildly. One main point being how they structured the intervention, so how they delivered the class of music and singing, was either wildly different from study to study, or there was no information on it whatsoever. And another aspect of the methodologies that varied was how they chose to measure an effect on well-being, which led to this interesting question of what is well-being and how do we measure it? One of the very important studies for me came from Daisy Fancourt and friends, 2016, where they implemented a 10-week-long group drumming class where people who were getting NHS support for mental health issues were enlisted to go to these drumming classes, and they were assessed via standardized questionnaires that are used as standard in hospital as to whether or not things like depression, anxiety, and social resilience were getting better, whether or not they felt like they were improving over the 10 weeks. What's interesting to note about this study is that the questionnaires are purely quantitative. They're done on a Likert scale, and they're focused on things that are considered negative impacts, like losing sleep or losing interest in your appearance, losing your appetite. They're looking to see whether or not you're suffering from a negative effect, where more recently, in a papers such as Sarah Asenso's from 2018, we're beginning to conceptualize well-being as the presence of positive influences. So having deep social connections, making friends, and having self-esteem is also part of well-being. And that's something that's just coming about very recently. Looking at well-being in this way, I think the World Health Organization began to look at it like that from 2015. So our concept of what constitutes well-being is re-emerging. It's being renewed, and what that means is that all of the work that's been done previously needs to be done again with this new concept of what well-being is. And I've put a little graphic up there, the logo for the What Works for Wellbeing Centre, which is the group of people that commissioned this study by Dakin, that are linked to policy making within the UK government. So it's something that's a bit of a hot button topic right now, which is all very interesting. And I think the thing for me as a musician is that I'm not a doctor, and I don't think in binary terms when it comes to well-being. I'm more drawn to this qualitative analysis developed by Sarah Asenso here, because it's emotional, and I think that's what music always has been to me. And a recurring theme in all of this is that I've got an instinct about what drumming can do for people, but it's taken some time to go through the academic pathway to back it up with evidence. So this study by Sarah Asenso delivered basically the same 10-week drumming intervention to basically the same type of participant, people who were in receipt of therapy from the NHS for mental health. And she, through interviews and focus groups, analysed the transcripts of what people were saying about their experiences, and was able to pull out, through interpretive phenomenological analysis, these overarching themes in what they were saying. Things like feeling good, things like being having high self-esteem, things like having strong connected relationships, and that sort of thing really speaks to me. So what I decided to do, what I decided to do was to put together a pilot study where I delivered a workshop to people and to measure the effect of that workshop based on Asenso's themes. The first thing I considered doing, participants-wise, because I'm interested in how it's affected Posey cognitively, is I wanted to look at people who were suffering a similar cognitive decline, but it quickly became apparent that I couldn't pull together people who were suffering with long COVID cognitive decline. It's just there's no way to find those people with my resources. And I looked at dealing with people with dementia, and I thought I could deliver the course to residents at the care home where my mum works. But it quickly became apparent that getting consent from people who are suffering with dementia would be difficult. And also the ongoing COVID situation meant that going into a care home and delivering in that way wasn't exactly practical. So throughout this, I designed a pilot class where I wanted to take what I have already done as a one-to-one teacher with drums and scale it up to a group environment. I also designed a questionnaire where I asked questions based on Asenso's themes. I wanted to deliver the class and then gather the results online in a questionnaire and have a look at them and see what learning I could pull from this one-off event. Next. Thank you. Yep. I quickly settled on pulling participants from the student body at the Academy of Music. Because of that, I wanted to show them this piece of music from the grade 1 syllabus from 1993. I didn't shy away from showing them sheet music with them being previously interested in music. What I decided to do was to see if I gave each participant an individual piece of a drum kit, whether I could get them to all play as one unit a piece of music from the grade 1 syllabus. So that was the concept. And the questionnaire that I designed backgrounded how long they'd been playing music, what their current idea of how music intersects with well-being is, whether or not they'd had any help or treatment for mental health in the past. And then I went on to ask for each point in Sarah Senso's themes, whether or not those emotions came up during the session. So this example is from the first theme of hedonia, or feeling feelings of joy. And I got a quantitative yes, no, maybe response from them. But then I also chucked in a space for them to write in more detail anything that they felt, so I could get a qualitative perspective on it too. Next slide, please. This is what it looked like when I delivered it at the Academy. The names have been changed to protect the innocent. As you can see, I've given Bulbasaur the snare, I've given Charmander a floor tom, and I've given Squirtle the kick drum and the high toms. I gave him 2 instruments because he said he played before, and I took the ride line. And we were able, within half an hour of playing, to get the thing together, which was very promising. It went a lot better than I thought it would. Anyhow, some of the things that people said in their responses to me, play music helped me deal with the loss of my dad last year. Play music is something that's helped me to go outside and defeat my anxiety. There's a blissful feeling when we get it all together. The session made me have to slow down. And some of the other quotes that haven't appeared there were that the session overall was really, really great. And I did find that at the end, when I asked overall, how did you find the session? All 3 participants responded 5 out of 5. So this was generally quite positive, but I feel in the analysis that there was some selection bias there. Only 3 people perhaps wasn't enough to get a very strong signal. They were all musicians, and I think delivering the workshop to the general public would have been more useful. And it also seemed that everybody responded that within the last 5 years they dealt with some issues around their mental health. So there's a question there that I think it might be for someone else to answer, of whether or not musicians are people that suffer with mental health in general. I don't know, but I think that's an interesting thing to note. I noticed some response fatigue as each question went on, as I covered each point in Sarah Senso's themes. The amount of information that I was getting in the paragraph where they could put their own thoughts was getting smaller and smaller. So as time went on, they responded with shorter and shorter answers. And I also found that they were putting feelings from one theme into the box for another theme, because as humans, we don't compartmentalize our emotions like that. And I didn't give them an opportunity to know that they were going to be asked about each different theme and to think about it beforehand. So I found that there was some confusion about where to put what information into what box. And I also found that as time went on, people were saying the same kinds of thing, just worded a little bit differently. Because they weren't unblinded to the study, I feel like there was some bias for giving positive results. I told them that this work was going to impact upon being able to use music to help people with their mental health, and they felt very strongly about this as something that could help. So they wanted to give me good answers. And I was also in front of them generating rapport. It's a thing that we've done together. We were collaborative in the effort, and I wonder if that didn't introduce some bias. Perhaps the most important thing that emerged from the session, though, is that the 10 minutes that I'd allocated at the end for a debrief ran to 45 minutes. And it's because we created this collaborative atmosphere where we all felt connected. People began to open up at the end, and the participant that had dealt with the passing of his father was able to talk about it. Another person who'd had a very troubling time through the pandemic, being isolated at home with a large family in a small house. These things came up, and they were not really anything to do with music. And it led me to conclude that perhaps it's not actually the drumming that does the work of the healing, but the drumming facilitates this moment after the fact where we can talk and do healing. So perhaps the drumming is just the way to get to the place that's healing, and it's not the actual carrying out of the drumming itself, which I didn't expect. And so if I was to build that into a larger project, I definitely consider allocating more time for that type of thing. I'd like to do it for the general public. I'd like to do it for a longer amount of time, and I'd probably make some tweaks to my questionnaire because I think it was a bit long-winded and it wasn't as simple as I thought it was. Some careful consideration for me would have to be given to dealing with those types of emotions. So when things come up like bereavement, I'm happy to talk with the participants on a human level, but if I'm meant to be delivering this professionally, I do have to consider how to be careful and professional about that. Like I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist, and I don't want to play with people's feelings in that way. So I'd want to set up something for myself so that I was able to help people where any difficult issues come up. And
yeah, you're at 18 minutes.
Thanks, James. I'd also worry that if I were to do a session over 10 weeks, when it comes to an end, if those people had gotten some benefit out of it, I wouldn't want to just drop them. I'd want to consider how to carefully safeport them into being able to continue this without me. For me, the potential impact of this work stretches to the general public post-pandemic, people who have dealt with anxiety and loneliness on the back of COVID-19, but also poverty from job loss and any lasting anxieties are predicted, according to the World Happiness Report in 2021, to skyrocket as our capacity to deal with mental health issues plummets. The NHS has noticed this. They've put together a long-term plan to help take some of the strain off the health service by social prescribing, as they call it, where they want to filter people who are dealing with these kinds of issues to community-based interventions, things like arts and crafts and things like music workshops, which is interesting to me. Another final point there is that we're giving our children right now a recovery curriculum in schools where we're focusing on maths, English and science to make up for all of the stuff that they've lost because of the pandemic, which means that arts and humanities are going to be cut, which is something that was already happening before the pandemic. So I think if kids are going to get music lessons, it's going to have to happen outside of schools now in situations perhaps like this. Overall, I'd like to conclude that from my research, drumming does have an impact on well-being and mental health and can be used to build resilient humans in resilient communities. Thanks for your time. I have a bibliography on screen right now, which will be submitted separately in an annotated fashion if you wanted to see it. I'd like to thank you all for your time, for being here, for being so polite and quiet, and ask you if you have any questions.